Get started with Tanium role-based access control in today's Tech Talk. Well, welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. And any IT solution worth its bits is going to support a permissions architecture, popularly known as RBAC, role-based access control. And RBAC determines what you can do and what you can do it to. And today, I've invited Tanium's foremost RBAC expert to the show for a tour for you of these capabilities. And this will be helpful for folks just starting out with Tanium and those looking to optimize their mature Tanium environments. So help me welcome Kat. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Kat. I've been with Tanium for about 3 years now. I started in the TAM organization. In my time as a TAM, I was also a console and RBAC specialist, helping customers understand how Tanium RBAC works, as well as how they can best utilize it in their environments and optimize all of the unique capabilities that we have in Tanium for their various groups. I've recently joined our product management organization and am happy to be continuing to support our RBAC and console needs. So thanks for having me, Ashley.
Yeah, well, congrats on your recent promo. I wasn't aware of that. That's a good deal. They got a really good find there when they brought you into that team. So, I'm glad you're here, Kat, because this is a big topic. And even as somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, and I've worked with RBAC and other contexts like, say, Microsoft Active Directory, you still have to learn the terminology and the tools, and sometimes it's just a little different from one product to the next how it's implemented. So this is a big topic. Where do we even start typically when you're talking to customers about Tanium's RBAC?
So most customers, users of Tanium, have an understanding of RBAC on a base level, whether that's through Active Directory or another tool where they've configured this access. So the first place I like to start with Tanium is understanding those core components and terminology so that you can then see how the pieces come together into our RBAC structure and how you can grant access to different teams in your console.
So I'm guessing that we probably start with users because the user is going to log in and they're going to get some permissions to some stuff. How do we get the users? Because I know, speaking from experience, I've done this wrong or incorrectly, I guess would be the proper use of grammar. And I've also done it, learned to do it correctly. So, from the beginning, just quickly, if you could touch on how do we even get that list of users and groups into Tanium from some other source?
We have a couple of different options when it comes to getting users into Tanium, and it also depends on your configuration. Tanium is a cloud-first setup. So if you are using our Tanium cloud environment, you can use our cloud management portal to connect directly to your IDP and pull in users or even user groups into your environment based off of various attributes, like a security group that they might be a part of, or some other configured attribute so that they can get access into Tanium. You can also configure local users if you just want to have one or two users to sign into Tanium and don't want to connect all the way through your IDP. So you have a couple of different options there. And for our on-premise setups, you have a similar configuration. You can connect to a cloud IDP. You can connect to an on-prem AD infrastructure with LDAP sync, or again, you can use local users if you just have one or two users using Tanium during a proof of concept.
Fantastic. So we've got our users populated correctly. And I wanted to start there because I know in working with customers over the years, sometimes we've started without that and we said, oh, wait, we got to go back and get that right first. So that's your first base. Now you mentioned there's some terminology here. Why don't you review with us some of the terms, the different types of groups, users and computers and content sets, roles, personas, all that stuff. Why don't you walk us through kind of the baseline terminology?
If you're looking at the diagram on my screen, it might look a little bit complicated, but I want to assure you that it's not as complicated as this diagram makes it look. The simple things to understand are a group of permissions equals a role. So that's what you have access to. A group of computers makes up your computer groups, kind of implied from the name. And those roles and computer groups can get assigned to a user group, or even a persona to define your scope of access inside of Tanium. Today, I'm hoping to deep dive into each one of these concepts to show you what they look like in the console and how you can use them in real life. But I did want to cover broadly what these terms mean as I use them today.
This is always my one little soapbox piece I have to say when we talk about RBAC, because I was an Active Directory guy for years, and we had this acronym AGLP. Accounts go into global groups, which go into local groups, which get assigned permissions. It's a standard four-phase RBAC model. So you have groups of users and groups of permissions, which gives you this many-to-many relationship. And you can see that in this diagram that Kat has on the screen, because you've got users that go into groups, and then those groups get permissions. That's really your kind of your best practice path here. I'm curious, Kat, in practice, do you see a lot of people following those best practices? And I imagine they get into trouble if they start assigning things to one-off users, and then that one user is no longer with the company.
Absolutely. User groups are the best way to go. And that's the configuration that I see in most environments. Even if today you only have one user that has that set of permissions, tomorrow you could hire somebody that needs the same level of access because they're helping that one user. Instead of having to compare and contrast the permissions that you assign to that one user and make sure that they are assigned to this new user, having a user group be where you assign those roles in computer groups allows easy onboarding of new team members or transitions between different teams.
So where would you like to start? We've got all these boxes here. Which one do you want to tackle first?
But one thing I do want to call out, as I go through these different items, our documentations team has done an excellent job of breaking them down in their core components inside of our Tanium documentation. After this video, if you ever need a reference, I highly recommend checking out our documentation. It gives great examples. But I know not everybody likes to just read text on a screen. So instead, I'm going to go into the console and show you what it looks like in practice. The first thing I want to start with is our content sets. Content sets are one of those items that are fairly unique to Tanium. The easiest way to think about them is as a folder that you can put items into. On your Windows machine, you can put files, documents, different types of items into folders. And then you can assign different levels of access to either that whole folder or the different components inside of that folder. Content sets are the same thing. It is your folder that you can put Tanium objects into and then assign different levels of permission to those items. So for instance, if we go and look at our asset content set, and most of the modules that we have in Tanium come with their own content set that holds the items that belong to that particular module. For asset, that comes with different sensors, packages, saved questions. But under the sensor section here, we can see there are 5 sensors that are part of this particular folder that you could grant access to. Out-of-the-box content sets are great. You can't modify out-of-the-box content sets by moving items out of those folders, but you can create your own folders in Tanium. So if I go and create a new content set, say for instance, I have a team that is responsible for creating custom sensors in Tanium or custom sensors and packages to test them before granting access to everybody else. I could create a folder for that team to be able to put those items into their own selected content set to hide access to the rest of Tanium until they are fully tested. So for instance, always stick with a good naming convention in all things RBAC. I will say our sensor and package dev team. You can also give it a description so that it provides more context, and that way your names don't get too long. And then when I save it here, I have a brand new folder to put items into.
That's a great analogy. I love the folder analogy. That I've never heard that before. It makes so much sense because you're right. There's different kind of things you can stuff in that folder. And one example that I've seen a lot of customers use is their Tanium admins who have elevated permissions might stuff things in that folder that only they should have access to, like a certain package that could potentially have destructive capabilities across the environment if not used properly. Maybe they kind of squirrel it away in a content set with special permissions around it so that only certain people can use it. This is great. Yeah.
So the next step of having a content set is making sure people can access it. As you mentioned, our admins in Tanium have access to all content sets that exist since they have access to everything in Tanium. But if you aren't an admin, somebody needs to give you access to this content set. And content sets are tied to permission. And as I mentioned before, a group of permissions makes up our Tanium roles. So in this environment, I have most of our modules imported. That means we have over 200 out-of-the-box roles we give you to utilize. That's a lot of roles. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it looks. The other thing that we give you is a quick links page in our help documentation that takes you to all of the documentation about these out-of-the-box roles. For instance, if I wanted to see what roles are a part of Interact, since everybody has Interact, I can open up this quick link and it will take me directly to the out-of-the-box roles section for Interact.
And I think this is where a lot of people live when they're first building out their roles is they got to say, okay, I need to be able to do X. And for this module, which role is it? And then they can grant that to the user. Try it now, right? And then they can all of a sudden they've got the access they need. So yeah, I love these pages. We'll put these all in the show notes as well, these links for you. But yeah, this is a massive resource for anybody building out their RBAC.
And I'll also say I have been working with Tanium's RBAC for the 3 years I've been here. Even I don't know all of the out-of-the-box roles that we have. I can't tell you all of the roles that we have for all of the modules and all of the permissions that they grant. We have a lot of granularity we can provide. So these quick links are very helpful, both when you're building out your initial RBAC setup, but also if you add any new modules, or we recommend reviewing your RBAC setup once a year to make sure that you're still granting the access that you want. So even if you've had Tanium for a long time, these links are still very valuable. As Ashley mentioned, this will help you answer the question of what level of access do I want to give my team members? Even if you aren't very familiar with all of the different permissions, you can see at the top the out-of-the-box roles that we provide, all of the permissions that comprise those roles, and descriptions about those different permissions. So if I'm granting a new team access to Tanium and I say, what should they be able to do in this module? Well, for Interact, it's pretty straightforward. Do they need to be able to ask questions with our question bar? If the answer is yes, then we need at least Interact Basic User assigned to those individuals. Then the question becomes, right, there's one more permission that's available. Do they need to be able to deploy action from questions in Tanium? If the answer is yes, then they need the Interact Power User to be able to deploy those actions. The one
All right,
thing
so
that
I've got a
seen,
question here for you, because
yeah,
I'm just thinking in my head. I've seen the console when there's barely any permissions defined, and I'm like, wait, where'd that go? Oh, it's not set up for this user. What's a good way for people to test this? Do they have like a test user that they're configuring against so they can kind of model these and have it in a separate log? What do you recommend to folks when they're modeling these out to make sure they're getting what they need?
when you're first configuring RBAC access or configuring access to a new group, I always recommend creating a persona with the roles that you want to assign to that particular group so that you can switch into that persona and test out exactly what they'll be able to see inside the Tanium console. That is like a different profile that you can switch into and completely changes your scope of access to show what they would be able to access and see, did I give them enough access? Did I give them too much? Do I need to modify one or two things? And then you can make those changes before somebody else signs into the console and has to do the testing for you.
Very nice. I like that. But you have dropped so many good nuggets right here. I'm going to have to put these in the show notes because you're giving us all these great best practices. All right, keep going. I apologize for interrupting.
And later on, we'll go through creating a persona and testing out a couple of role setups so you can see exactly what that looks like. The one thing I will call out on this page before going back to the Tanium console, the Interact Power User, you can see it has all of the permissions selected. That means if I grant Interact Power User, I don't also need to give them access to Interact Basic User, Interact read only, and interact show. All of those permissions are also in power user. So that really simplifies your RBAC setup. You don't need 4 roles to grant access to interact. You just need 1 with the highest level of access that you want to grant. So we've looked at some of the out-of-the-box roles that we have available. Tanium goes a step further and lets you create your own roles if for some reason those out-of-the-box roles don't fit your use case. Most of the time they fit customer use cases, but on occasion there's a few extra things that people want to grant access to, or as we discussed earlier, want to grant access to custom content sets. So on our create roles page, I'm going to continue with our story of we have a test group for our sensors and packages. So they need to be able to test creating sensors, creating packages, and then be able to use those in questions and actions. As always, we give it a good name. I'll stick to similar to what we said for our content set.
Speaking of names, one tip I think is really helpful. Sometimes when you look at those list of roles in the big list, you're like, okay, which ones did I create? Which ones are out of the box? It's helpful sometimes to put a little acronym or company abbreviation at the very beginning so they all sort out in a way that you can see just the ones for your environment. Sometimes that's helpful.
It is, especially if you have different teams that will have similar permissions, but to slightly different content set. You could always add a small denomination to the front of your names to be able to know exactly which group these belong to. Or you can also add a description to get a little bit more in depth on what this role does. Right from this creating rules page or editing rules page, you can add users and user groups. You can also do this from the users and user groups page, but this streamlines your workflow if you already know who you want to grant access to this role. Below that, we have our large list of various permissions that you can grant inside of Tanium and the different levels of access you can grant. Up at the top here is our administration section. Every environment will have this section, as all of the permissions here correspond to the items under the administration section for configuration.
One I'll point out right here that's really handy is client status. Sometimes you've got like first level help desk and they're not going to get all the admin access to Tanium, but that client status right there under administration lets them see, for example, the last time a machine was online. And that's really popular, I think, for some people when they want to give them just that extra little bit, but not all the administrative access.
It is. It's a very valuable tool to see the last time that a machine was online. Client status is not a part of most of our out-of-the-box roles. So it's a very common one that I will see a single permission assigned to a custom role that gets assigned to individuals, different user groups, or even personas so that they can see the client status page. The other one that I see that's very common is the bandwidth throttles. We can grant read access or even write access to the bandwidth throttles so that your networking team may not need to be full Tanium admins, but may need to come in and adjust or at least see the bandwidth throttles that you have in place in Tanium. And by creating a custom role here, you can grant access to those pages.
Now, is there a difference in the icons? Like you haven't clicked on any of those yet, because I remember previously that sometimes there's different types of icons you get when you click on them. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So the first one is the check mark with the circle around it. While all icons are gray, that means the permissions have not been selected at all. When I click on one of these, it turns green. The circle around it indicates that there are also permissions that are inherited by granting this permission. For instance, by granting write access to computer groups, I kind of need to be able to see those computer groups to be able to create one. So it implies read access. And this is shown by the orange icon. And if you hover over it, you can see exactly what permission caused this one to be inherited. Then the other icon is the check mark with no circle around it. And if I click on this one, it also turns green. But as you can see, no other permissions were selected because when it doesn't have a circle around it, it indicates that there are no implied permissions. So we have gray means that it's not selected at all. Green with a circle around it means it's selected and permissions are implied. Orange indicates that it's an implied permission from something else. And the green check mark without a circle around it means that it's selected, but it doesn't imply anything else. So if we wanted to grant access to different modules, we can do that across this entire group. The one that I'm most interested in right now, because we wanted to be able to test new sensors and packages, would be Interact. Interact. We have a lot of permissions related to data collection and Interact, but if all I need to do is ask questions, then I just need to grant Ask Dynamic Question. The one thing that I will say that when you are creating custom rules for any modules, even Interact, I clicked on one of the permissions inside of the Interact section, and I want to call out that Interact Show is not inherited. So one of the things that I've seen, if you are creating any custom roles, if you don't grant Interact Show, the person that has access to this role will not be able to see Interact at all. Even if you granted additional access inside of Interact, unless this Interact Show permission is either explicitly selected or implied, you will not see the module in your module dropdown. That's a gotcha to watch out for.
Yeah, that's a popular rookie mistake in RBAC. I've seen that plenty of times.
So down here at the bottom, we have our platform content permissions. These permissions correspond with the different content items that we can create. So all of the permissions down here rely on those content sets we were talking about. For instance, if I grant the ability to read sensors or create sensors by granting write access, I then get this little circle with a number around it. This circle indicates the content sets that are assigned to this particular permission. And you have a couple of ways that you can assign content sets. You can either assign it to individual permissions by clicking on this little circle, and then I can select my sensor package T. And now I have a 1 next to it. And this indicates I have one content set assigned. If I hit the little caret, I can see what that content set is. The other option you have, if I select a couple of other permissions here, you can see that we have a bunch with 0. But if I click on the Apply Content Sets button, and then I remove all of the content set and add in just asset and base. And these are just examples. You can now see all of the icons have a 2 next to them, because now I have removed all of the other content sets that were assigned by unchecking all the content sets. And I have selected asset and base for all the permissions that were selected. So now you can see them next to all of the permissions.
And could you clarify for us, what is base?
Base is a content set that comes with the Tanium platform out of the box. It contains a lot of our core sensors and packages that everybody in Tanium has access to. The other thing I will note on this page is this add all content sets that exist or will exist to the permissions selected above. If I check this box down here at the bottom, you can see all of the content sets that are assigned and what permissions they're assigned to. If I check this box, you can see this number jumps from 107 to 381 items, because now I have all content sets that exist or will exist selected. This is not something I recommend using if you're selecting a lot of permissions. If you need access to all content sets that exist or may exist in the future, you most likely are going to be an admin. The one exception that I commonly see to using this particular button is if you're granting access to read sensor. If you just have access to read sensor, this means you can use the sensor inside of a question in Tanium. So if you grant access to all content sets that exist or will exist to read sensor, it means that you can see sensors in all content sets. The one thing to keep in mind with that is if you do have a segmented content set that you wanted for your admins or your testing team when they are creating sensors, this would override that. So it depends on your environment. Do you need people to have access to all sensors in Tanium? Or do you want some sensors to be segmented? That's up to you. The other type of role that we have in Tanium is a deny role. So on that permission section that we saw, there are a lot of modules and different types of permissions that you can grant allow access to. If I switch this to deny, you can see that this section becomes a lot smaller. The deny role is only for platform content permissions and administration permission, where you can explicitly deny access to particular parts of Tanium or to particular content sets inside of Tanium. You cannot grant deny roles for modules, only for platform content or administration.
That's interesting. I just learned something. I've been using this for years, and I just now realized that was the case. Thank you.
One cool new feature that we added in recently is the ability to edit multiple roles at the same time. Now, you can't edit system rules, ones that we provide out of the box, but if I filter by the custom ones that I created, The only caveat that I have is they all have to be the same type, either all allow or all deny. And then I can select multiple roles, go up here to the top, and add or bulk remove specific permissions from these different roles. So if I have 3 different teams that all have a very similar role, but only have access to a particular content set, and then I need to add a new permission to each one of those roles, I can do that. I can see the selected roles. I can see at the bottom here what permissions I want to add. So if I wanted to add at the bottom the ability to read sensor and I click next, I can now not only add the permission, but add particular content sets to each one of these roles. So I can add my content set. I'll use the base as an example again. And now I can choose which role I want to add the content set to. I can
This
even come
is
in.
so amazing. I apologize for jumping in here, but I tell you, I've seen the pain because, again, years of supporting customers. Before this capability existed, I had a customer had like 20 different business units and all these different custom roles defined for one for each business unit. And when they would purchase a new Tanium module, they'd have to go into every one of those and allow those permissions across all those one at a time. This is beautiful to see the ability because like that's a great use case. If you're adding a new module to your Tanium instance, you just get the latest engage or investigate, for example, and now you need to add just that permission across a bunch of different roles or different business units. There you go.
And then I can apply the permissions. And you don't even have to apply the same content sets to every permission. So yes, you can have a different content set or the same content set for all of the different roles. For most situations, our out-of-the-box roles solve all of your business use cases. But if there is a reason that they don't, or if you want to use custom content sets inside of our modules, the best practice that I have is to clone an existing role and add the content set. So if I wanted to grant access to reporting, but I only wanted to grant access to a particular content set, or I wanted to add a custom content set, I have options for different levels of access. Go take a look at the quick links page for reporting. And I chose that I want to have reporting user access. I can't modify the system role, but I can check this box and clone it and add in at the top that it is the custom content set copy of the reporting user. So I know what level of access it's granting. And I can come down here to the bottom to the data section, which covers reporting. One thing that I always recommend is selecting the inherited permissions just to make sure that you get all of the content sets assigned that you are expecting. And then down at the bottom here, click the Apply Content Sets button, select your custom content set. And if I reselect it so that it has this checkbox and select, it will apply this content set to all of these permissions that I had selected. So now this particular role can see the reporting content set and can see this custom content set. You could also remove write access from the reporting content set so that I can see the reporting items that are provided, the reports and dashboards that provide so much value, but I can only create new dashboards inside of this custom content set. And by cloning this role instead of starting from scratch, I already have all of the permissions that I need selected instead of having to determine, did I need access to dashboards? What level of access would I normally grant if I wasn't looking at custom content sets? And it helps answer a lot of those questions for you. So where possible, if you're going to use custom content sets, create a clone of an existing role and just add in your custom content set.
That's handy because I can see how you might want to clone your reporting roles for, in this example, different business units, again, who only want to be able to report on the machines in their scope. That's good.
So that's a lot about roles. Let's look at the other side of our diagram and let's look at computer groups. So
Well, thank you, Kat. That wraps up part 1 of this series. There's so much to talk about. We split this up into a couple different shows for you. Again, all the links that you need are in the show notes below. So you can read through those and let's keep watching because now we're going to move on to part 2 And so you can click that in the same playlist where you found this video. Like I said earlier, this is a big topic. Even for me, as an experienced Tanium admin of years and having industry experience, it took me a little bit to get my head wrapped around this. And if it were me and I were just getting started, I would take that image from the help that she used as that diagram. I would set that to like my desktop wallpaper or something, like, or print it and post it in my cube or on my wall at home somewhere, because that diagram is going to be your saving grace. It's going to help you navigate where these things go. So go into the docs. All the links are here that Kat was using today, just in the show notes below in the description of the YouTube video. Go in there, read through those, and then, as always, if you need any help, feel free to reach out. But I think you've got a great start with today's video and using those links. So there you go. That is our getting started with Tanium RBAC. We hope that's helpful. And until next time, Go-Tanium.